And just waiting 3 minutes. We'll wait for Sharmeen to join us because up north is very difficult with the internet. So there is that issue.
I'm just messaging her.
I'll just get my cat off some paintings. I'll just be back.
Mashal, we're not live, are we?
We are, ma'am. We're live.
We are
Yes.
live?
Yes, I think we should start because in another minute we'll be live.
Yeah.
Sharmeen's trying, but she's not connecting. I'll try again. Okay.
Seema, if Sharmeen doesn't come,
Hmm.
we have to cut it down to 1.5 hours
Take
too
it,
long.
take it.
If Sharmeen doesn't come,
She's just saying I'm trying again. Yeah. Okay.
then we do it to an hour. Just
Okay.
suggest that.
Okay.
Madam, it's 6 p.m. Would you like to start?
Seema, should we start?
Yeah, let's start and then maybe she can just join in because she's trying to connect.
Okay. Well, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Good evening to everybody, the panelists here, and we have a good number of attendees also who are watching in. Today we meet really to conclude a human rights festival that we began 3 weeks ago. The Ministry of Human Rights, as part of its awareness program, has used many different mediums to talk about human rights. When we talk about human rights, it's very essential that we create awareness among the citizens on what are their rights, what are the remedies available to them for the actualization of those rights, and what are Pakistan's international and national constitutional commitments towards human rights. So over the past few years, the Ministry of Human Rights has used, among others, we have used truck art to paint posters and pictures at the back of about 20 trucks, which have gone all over Pakistan to talk about child marriages and women's rights, girls' rights to education. We have used radio to spread awareness about the process of women's rights.
Yeah, Sharmeen.
And we have used key figures such as the chairman of the Islamic Ideology Council to talk about women's rights to inheritance. TVCs have talked about disability and old age. Brand ambassadors such as Shahzad Roy, Mavish Hayat have talked about child abuse. Recently during COVID, we had a storytelling competition and a poster competition with Group Development Pakistan to talk about children and how they cope with COVID and situations of child rights. And finally, we have had this film festival. And the film festival has covered a really wide range of issues on human rights. So while we've talked of women empowerment, we've talked of social cohesion through women's sports, we've talked about juvenile justice in the case of Iqbal, who was released after 23 years in prison as a young child. And I must congratulate the Justice Project for the hard work that they did in releasing Iqbal and in that film. And we've talked about environment, we talked about Kashmir, and finally today, when we culminate the whole film festival, which we also had 3 panel discussions, we want to talk about the power of film and how film is a transformative agent for social change. So today we had actually 4 panelists for our discussion. Unfortunately, Mr. Lalchand, who's our parliamentary secretary, has got some emergency and was unable to come. And Sharmeen, I think we can't contact because she's in the northern areas. So what we will do is maybe curtail the length of this panel discussion, but we'd have with us 2 eminent persons who are dealing with culture and who have a strong role in talking about film. So without much ado, I'd like to introduce them and then maybe ask a few questions to them, and then take the discussion from there. And whoever would like to ask questions may kindly chat it in. And we have Mashal, who is going to read them out to me, or I will read them myself. So without much ado, let me introduce Ms. Patricia McPhillips. Ms. Patricia McPhillips was appointed Director of the UNESCO Pakistan office recently, and she is a representative of UNESCO in the country. She offers extensive experience within the United Nations system and is dedicated to the mandate of UNESCO. The UNESCO office works with a broad base of stakeholders to promote and to support education for all, culture, communication, information, and science as a dynamic and critical tool in developing, building, and maintaining strong and dynamic and inclusive societies. Ms. McPhillips is honored by the opportunity to live and work in Pakistan, and she just arrived here recently. So welcome to Pakistan, Patricia. I will introduce then Nusrat Khwaja. Nusrat Khwaja is a freelance writer and an independent researcher. She writes on art and literature for leading magazines and newspapers. She is a practicing landscape designer and she is a horticulturist. She participates in cultural events in the city and has hosted talks at the Adab and the Karachi Literature Festivals. Nusrat is a member of the Karachi Biennale Discursive Committee, and she has a bachelor's in cultural anthropology from Mount Holyoke College. Nusrat lives in Karachi. Thank you, both of you, for being here and for being a part of this panel. Patricia, let me start with you. UNESCO has been a very long strategic partner of Pakistan, and I understand that you've been our partner since 1958, which goes back a long time. As someone is associated with culture and with art, what do you see as the importance of film as an agent of social change?
Okay, no, thank you very much. And I really want to thank you for allowing me to be a part of this panel, Madam Chairman. And I really want to give my congratulations to the Ministry of Human Rights and the European Union and Pakistan for hosting the film festival itself. Your question is a very interesting one, and UNESCO has always considered cinematography, filmmaking, and documentary heritage critical in the promotion, in the exchange of ideas, intellectual growth, and creativity. Films and documentaries really are a motivational tool to raise awareness, educate populations, and create practical innovations that can be very positive tools to promote positive social change and environmental change. When we talk about the film industry as a whole, I think it remains argumentably probably the most high profile and most influential of all the creative industries, with a considerable cultural, social, as well as economic weight in various parts of the world. Considering that film is a powerful medium that can reflect and shape both society and culture, the film industry really needs to address the challenges faced and be more inclusive and holistic in approach and result. For instance, diversity and gender parity are crucial in the filmmaking process. And if films are to reflect the experiences and perspectives of the various groups in society, then they really need to be more inclusive in nature. For example, the film industry tends to portray traditionally a lot of negative stereotypes. Negative cultural and racial stereotypes in films mostly depict women negatively and in a very limited capacity. So I think negative stereotypes of women and minorities have historically dominated the film industry. However, this is changing, and to help overcome this, UNESCO's 2005 Convention on the Protection and Promotion on the Diversity of Cultural Expression includes gender equity as one of its 11 monitoring areas under the convention. And albeit slow, I think there are changes in the film industry as it is itself becoming aware of such issues such as disparity in the projection of women and minorities. And more voices are demanding change. And this comes not only from society itself, but there are noticeably more women directors and producers in film. Also, films are changing in the sense of with technology, there are a lot of new and growing opportunities for individuals to make their own films digitally versus the traditional filmmaking. Technology is really changing and transforming the way we perceive films. The technology really has given a way to, I think, further democratize filmmaking where citizens can depict their issues and surroundings by recording videos and publishing them online. And this really has sparked a new way of communication. And I think we've all seen small independently made films and documentaries where it has really sparked our interest in nature or the environment or issues that we really had not had an exposure to before. So with the relative ease to access to inexpensive equipment, the whole filmmaking world, I think, has really opened up. However, this also has a range of challenges. Considering this, we need to remain cognizant of information overload, ethical dimensions such as privacy issues, hate speech, and discrimination, which it can also happen in these short-made films that are becoming more and more available. So maintaining a positive social change can be a challenge. Certainly, films are a powerful medium of communication that really transcend territorial and language barriers. We've all watched films in foreign languages and read the subtitles and benefited a tremendous amount. Regardless of our background, social views, etc., the film contents really have an enormous impact on it, especially in the way it's interpreted. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've put many very, very interesting ideas forward, Patricia. And on one of these ideas that go to you, Nusrat, you know, Patricia talked about changing films. And when we look at Pakistan's history of cinematography, we find, I think the first film was in 1948, and it was called Teri Yaad, as I understand. And film in Pakistan was predominantly produced in Lahore and of the very sort of filmy Bollywood style. And then we saw a decline in the industry. And then this revival of a sort of socially conscious genre of films coming up. So you have Manto and you have, I think it was Khuda Ke Liye and things like that, that brought forward a very interesting, very interesting dynamics to what film was in Pakistan. So I'll ask you a similar question is, how do you see this change in films? How do you see this change going? We have seen this social awareness, and how do you think it can make a substantive difference in breaking stereotypes and in enhancing the cause of human rights?
Just sorry to interrupt, but Sharmi's joined us on a phone line, so she is here and she hopefully can participate.
Oh, Sharmeen, welcome, Sharmeen. After Nusrat's question, I'd like to introduce you. So Nusrat, if you proceed with your question, then we'll introduce Sharmeen and hope she will be able to enlighten us, because she has taken such a strong positive role in film directing in Pakistan. So Nusrat, if you could just give me your
Yes, certainly, Rabia. You see, we had a kind of a mass popular market in cinema, which was suppressed in the 80s. And now what we see with the revival, although our film industry is nowhere near as strong as it used to be, but there are a lot of niche films and sort of in indie film groups that have come up. And I think this is something very exciting for our film industry. And I'd like to just highlight a specific issue here, and that is the transgender issue, which your ministry has worked very hard on as well and got the bill passed successfully in Parliament. So we had a film by Jamil Dehelvi called Immaculate Conception, in which the transgenders played a certain role. And after that, we have now in this sort of post-80s world and the revival is phase of Pakistani cinema, we have seen a very different sort of role given to transgenders in film. For instance, we have had Shanakht, we have had Darling, which was released at the Venice Film Festival. And then we had the one with Rani with Kami Sid. And hugely popular. Kami has been doing school rounds. It's a short film, and her film has been shown. And students, high school students, have been immensely receptive to this. So I just want to highlight this to show how even small and very low budget films that are dealing with contentious issues like the transgender issue are making an enormous difference in the acceptability of people on the fringe.
Okay, thank you, Nusrat. I'd like to introduce now, and she needs no introduction, Sharmeen Ubaid. Sharmeen, can you hear me? She's on mute, Seema.
I think she's muted herself. I've just messaged her. I think she is having problems.
Hello.
Oh,
Hi,
yeah.
Sharmeen,
Hi, I can hear you.
welcome. Okay, Sharmeen,
Hi.
I'd like to introduce you to the panelists and to our, we have quite a large number of attendees over here. So introduce you and then ask you a few questions. Thank you so much for taking the time. I know you're up in the northern areas and internet is an issue. Sharmeen Ubaid Chinoy is the first and only, I think, Pakistani female director to have been awarded 2 Academy Awards at the age of 37. Since 2001, she has made over 24 multi-award films in over 16 countries around the world. Her films include Student Athlete, Girl in the River, Song of Lahore, Saving Face, Peacekeepers, and Transgenders, Pakistan's Open Secret. In 2012, the Time magazine included Sharmeen in the annual list of the 100 most influential people in the world. That same year, the Pakistan government awarded her the highest civil honor, Hilal-e-Imtiaz. She holds a bachelor's degree from Smith College and 2 master's degrees from Stanford University. She was also awarded an honorary degree in fine arts from Smith College in 2018. Sharmeen, thank you so much for being here. And I would, like to talk a little bit about, I think people should know that after Sharmeen's movie, Saving Face, the National Assembly passed an acid and burns bill. And they talked about relief and support to victims of acid victims. And today, we did an analysis of acid victims, and we found out that from 2014 to today, there has been an 85% decrease in acid attacks on women. And mind you, there is no death penalty for this. So for people who advocate death penalty, we say that this is one crime that has been addressed efficaciously, awareness has been created. Kudos to people like Sharmeen who did such work, because today we see a substantive reduction in something that had become quite rampant post 2014. Sharmeen, I want to ask you a question is, when you, one of your I think your ethos is to talk about social change and how you can do social change through film, how you can highlight certain burning issues. Tell me something, what motivates you, what pushes you forward, and what are the challenges and the opportunities that you feel are available to you?
You know, film, I've always felt, has a way of eliciting empathy from people. If you have character-driven films that can speak to issues, people will be moved by it. My entire career has been built on it, in finding people whose stories propel people to look at the issue, whether it's on a legislative level or whether it's on a grassroots level. And so I think for me, the motivation, honestly, has always been the fact that the ethos of Pakistan, when it was laid, was very much laid by a man who believed in equality for men and women. And I'm a child born in 1978, and through the 80s, I saw that equality decline substantially. And I think the onus is on women to talk about the issues that confront them and to push the envelope on difficult subjects. And I'm very vocal about these subjects, and I know that that often lands me in a lot of trouble, but I think that you need to hold a mirror up to society, and film is an excellent way to do it. Because you can appeal to legislators to look at an issue, as we did in Saving Face and A Girl in the River, when it came to honor killings, and really pushed them to re-examine the laws. But also, I think that grassroots activism using film is equally important. So a number of my films and a number of other filmmakers who work on social justice issues films are put on a mobile cinema that I set up 4 years ago, that goes from village to village, town to town, screening the films. Because you can only bring about change in the way people address issues when you work on it from 2 levels, from the top and from the bottom. And that's why in a country like Pakistan, which has such high levels of illiteracy, film can change the way people look at an issue. Hello?
Now we can hear you. We had lost you for a bit.
Okay. Sorry, where did you lose me? Because
you just talk about top and bottom, and you address it from both sides.
Yeah, and I think that in a country like Pakistan, where you have such high levels of illiteracy, film can really change the way people see an issue.
And Sharmeen, what were the challenges you faced?
You know, holding up a mirror to society is never easy. We come from a culture where it is encouraged to not talk about certain taboo issues, to keep it within the 4 walls of the home. And so women are discouraged from speaking out. And I strongly believe that you need to make examples of people so that a society, a community moved into action. And so to get people to open up their lives as a filmmaker is extremely difficult. Rabia, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about that. I don't know where I lost you, but I was just saying that in a country where, and a culture where women are frowned, where speaking out is frowned upon, it is extremely difficult as a filmmaker to encourage them to talk about their stories because of the stigma attached to it.
I'm going to ask you the second question because I know you're having difficulty, and I want to ask you the questions first before I move to the other panelists, Sharmeen. What can you say to young directors who are following you, who look at you as a mentor, to ensure that social change and to ensure that they come into this field and they can use this medium. Um,
it's become extremely easy for young filmmakers to literally hold up their camera on their phone and create films, and then to publish them on their own, whether it's on YouTube or Vimeo or any of the other platforms that exist. So really, there's nothing holding young filmmakers back anymore. They should just go out there and tell the stories that are important to them, because we need it to bring up a sea of change. You need a sea of filmmakers.
Okay, thank you. I move to Patricia. Patricia, I think one thing is I know we've been working very hard to talk about, and one of the reasons for our film festival was also COVID, people being locked down and looking for venues to pass time, entertainment, education, and so on and so forth. Now, I know UNESCO has launched several initiatives in response to COVID and in response to perpetuating culture and to make culture accessible to audiences who are in lockdown. And I know we have seen over the world how people have in different ways resorted to the arts. Or I mean, we saw people in Italy singing on the balconies, you know, trying to express themselves in some way. So has UNESCO done anything specifically to use culture and to extend the intrinsic value of culture in times of lockdown, or any of the initiatives that you have taken that we could possibly use as best practices in Pakistan?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. Actually, yes, UNESCO, everything we do in Pakistan is actually through and with the government support. We've actually had 2 webinars called Resiliart, which is a UNESCO program globally, really promoting and keeping a global community interested in arts and culture. And so there's been many of these Resiliart webinars globally. And as I said, we were very fortunate that we were able to have 2 in Pakistan. And we had leaders from the arts community speak up and say different measures, and members of the government sharing ideas, you know, online sites where people can do like a global virtual looking through the museums that we have here, especially Lahore and Texla Museum, which have amazing things and have a huge capacity for development. Also in the Resiliart webinars that we had, one thing that really was raised across, I think, the Pakistani community was how the arts community is really struggling in the coronavirus environment. I mean, certainly globally, economically, it's been a major challenge. But for the arts community, it's really been a struggle globally, and certainly in Pakistan, where members of the arts community are suffering economically. They're not able to show their wares, to sell their wares, you know, everything from musicians who have really lost out economically to handicraft people. So I think that's been a real struggle, or that was what was reflected by Pakistanis themselves in the Resiliart webinars that we had here. Having said that, there are many things online. UNESCO globally has really done a lot to try to keep the arts and culture community in the forefront. And I just want to say, unfortunately, I think very often in situations like this, art and culture is often looked at as a luxury. And I really don't think it is a luxury. It's really a part of an identity of a people. Their art and their culture really goes much deeper than just a luxury item. So having said that, yeah, there's been lots of things that have happened, and we hope to really work more, especially probably to support the arts community as best, the arts and culture community and the musicians. And there's also, in addition to the tangible cultural heritage, there's also the intangible, which are the poets and the poems. And Pakistan has a deep history of this, and really to try to keep that going so it doesn't suffer in the long term during the COVID environment. Thank you.
So just to add to your question, Patricia, is UNESCO doing something with the intangible heritage of Pakistan? Is there any project that's going on currently? I know you had one very interesting project, which I was also, which was the Women's Museum. But are you working on the cultural heritage in any? Is there any plan to do that?
Well, generally now we're focusing a lot on the museums. We're really trying to build up the museum environment in Pakistan. I mean, there's a huge potential for not only economic development, but tourism development, and that's national and international. So we're really working hard to try to develop and promote the museums, because there's a wealth here. And certainly in the intangible, we're very interested in mapping it, documenting it, getting it all set. And I know what you're referring to about the Women's Museum. And at this point, and I hope a lot of people are listening to this, what we're really hoping to do is get a women's archive established. And there's tremendous material out there, but unless it's gathered and mapped, it's gone. And the women and men who have these items, slowly but surely, they're passing on, or their children really don't understand the value of the things that they have. And not only the physical the value of something physically, but perhaps it's poems, it's music, it's in it, things like this. So we're trying to move forward to get a women's archive going. Hopefully that would move into some type of women's museum. But the first step is really to get things mapped out and categorized, and really get a women's archive established. And certainly that would include film.
I know Charmaine has done a lot of mapping of in her Citizens Archive, but we do have a large number of attendees, and I think this is something that I think you should reach out to UNESCO and share if you have data or information or film or archival material. So we have a lot of young people on our as watching this panel, and maybe they could help send it forward. Nusrat, I turn to you. You talked about art films and socially conscious films coming, but we also at the same time have Pakistan Television, which has been for a long time perpetuating a gender stereotype of the Saas, Bahu, the Mazloom Aurat, and a lot of stereotypes in the portrayal of gender, which are prevalent primarily in all our TV dramas. How do we change this? How do we change this step? I once talked to a director and he said, "Madam, it sells." And that's why we perpetuate that, because that's what is economically viable. What is your take on this? How do you think that we can evolve to change the perspective of the way things are looked at, and try and move towards some sort of gender equity?
See, there is an anomaly, because I think these awful stereotypes where you see women being slapped and smacked, and they have actually increased in TV drama. And I would say that our earlier dramas were perhaps more socially conscious, more showing, more multiple narratives than you might see today. And this, I think, is an anomaly today in the way TV is selling drama. It's not good enough to say that it sells, because you can have a lot of rubbish that sells, but the thing is to have a kind of a proportionality between drama that sells and drama that sells by also giving a good message. For instance, Rabia, there was this film called Na Maloom Afraad, very popular. Fahad Mustafa was one of the actors, and it was filmed in Karachi. It was a very well done film. It showed Karachi as a character. It showed, sort of the urban disenchantment and people who have dreams and who are having problems fulfilling those dreams, but yet retaining the hope, maintaining resilience, as Patricia spoke of resilience. So you also have that kind of filmmaking, which can give a can give a good message in a popular way. And there's no reason to just say that sells. I mean, Na Maloom Afraad also sold. It was a box office success. So I think we need to also look at the influence of other dramas that we have access through to Netflix, etc., and what people are looking at over there. We have, unfortunately, as a population, I think, become more conservative in many ways, and these choices in a way reflect perhaps that orthodoxy or perhaps that intellectual passivity where we want to be challenged by media. And I think this is the key thing, that our academic institutions need to up their game. They need to be able to bring in more critical thinking, more multi-narratives in the way history is taught, in the way sociology is taught, so that our younger people have to make choices in their thought process. And that choice that they make in their thinking will then have manifestations across a wide range of media. So I think the problem is not just in media or in television. I think it goes to the heart of how our academics is being taught, how our textbooks are being written. And we really need to look at all of that in order to maintain a healthy balance between what the director said sells and between other quality stuff that sells as well as has a progressive message.
Thank you. I think that's a very valid point. I think sometimes things have to, and I think this is something that the Ministry of Human Rights has been working on, and we have talked also to the federal education that the knowledge of human rights, the knowledge of tolerance, the knowledge of your civic rights as a citizen must be inculcated very, very early on. So people should know what are your rights, and your rights are very well expounded in the Constitution of Pakistan, which is very, very, very clear on what are your rights as a woman, what are your rights as a child, what are the state's rights, what are the responsibilities, what is the social contract between the state and the citizen through very substantive constitutional and criminal and legal laws. So we are moving for that, but I think the journey is quite long because I think the whole world, as time is going on, is becoming less tolerant. And we're becoming more inclusive rather than expansive. Patricia, I turn to you. Do we, what are the projects that UNESCO is doing with Pakistan? And are there any projects on film? Are there any projects on the visual arts? You told me you're working on the museums, and that's really a wonderful thing, the archival. And you also mentioned tourism, I think. Would that be the documentation of sites or what? And what in the visual arts, is UNESCO doing anything in the visual arts? And also the collaborations, and in this, of course, the Ministry of Human Rights is willing to help you establish any necessary collaborations if need be. In the visual arts. So what is UNESCO doing with regard to the visual arts in Pakistan, or any very unique initiatives that it's taken worldwide?
Okay, thank you very much. Basically, what just as an overall picture, in culture, the overall goal here in Pakistan and globally really is to protect and promote the cultural heritage of Pakistan, to foster peace and sustainable development. So our interventions here focus on interventions on strengthening national authorities to safeguard and promote Pakistan's national heritage, culture, and creative industries and museums. So essentially, what we're really here to do is support the people and government of Pakistan, so they're able to do these initiatives to preserve their culture sustainably, nationally themselves. So having said that, I can just say what we're doing is, like I said, working to really promote museums. We're hoping, we're looking at, I mean, again, this is all done with our Pakistani partners. We're really hoping to establish some world-class museums in Pakistan, and I absolutely think that can happen. Certainly, there's the capacity and the enthusiasm of the people, and absolutely throughout the country, you absolutely have the sites and the artifacts. So considering that it's not just the artifacts in a museum, but throughout Pakistan, there's just an incredible wealth of archaeological sites that are there and available for people to go and visit. And I just want to highlight, a lot of this really has to also be targeted through education. So people understand the real value of as citizens of Pakistan, the real value of what you have here in your rich heritage. And again, it's the tangible and the non-tangible heritage. It's really quite overwhelming. And I also want to say, someone mentioned, I'm looking at my notes, I think it was Nusrat, or that was talking about, film can change the way people, look at an issue. And in addition to the cultural component of how Pakistan just has so much to offer, I mean, globally, it's a tremendous amount. In addition to that, there's also the nature. So when it comes to developing tourism and economic development in a responsible way, when you mix the cultural sites available in Pakistan, the artifacts and even the cultural sites themselves, and again, this really has to be emphasized and promoted through an educational channel, I think. There's a tremendous opportunity to also promote the nature here, which is astounding. It's phenomenal. And when many of these archaeological sites are in the middle of this amazing nature that it's a wealth of knowledge. And when it comes to, again, back to what I think it was Nusrat, changing film, changing how people think. We've all seen a nature program, and there's parts of the world I've never been to, but I've seen a nature program on it, and I really want to go. So I think we've all been very, very interested in this. And just a very small personal example, I know nothing about this snow leopard. And I saw a little documentary on this snow leopard. And actually I saw it on the television here in Islamabad. And I thought, wow, I'd really like to contribute financially or whatever you have to do to really help promote this snow leopard. So through social change, and it also involves climate change and all these other issues that film really plays a major role. Thank you.
Thank you. I think you really are spot on in this. When you talk about film or the visual arts, they stimulate a certain emotive response, a different part of the brain that makes you want to feel, not necessarily it's not data, it's not facts, it's not cold scientific research. It's just a feeling of the heart. And I think that's a very powerful thing, because suddenly you want to react. And we've had occasions, I mean, I've had occasions in my own life when I put up a picture. And I'll give you an example. It was years and years ago, about 30 years ago, I put up a picture of a woman and a child in a legal aid office. And I received a phone from across the world. And this man said, I want to support this woman. I will come to Pakistan. I will set up her bank account. I will support her child. She's 21 years old. And he flew over. He was a very rich man, and set up a bank account. It was based on one photograph. and there was I was out of the transaction, but there was a bank account open, and she was given money every month till the child turned 21. And that was exactly like your instinctive response when you see something that moves you. And there was, across the world, this man flew for 2 days, set up a bank account, supported that woman and her son, and his entire education. So I think the power of film and Sharmeen's films, in all fairness, have done a lot. We talk about acid victims. Sharmeen's films that she did for us talked about the nikah which is the marriage contract, ensuring that many times when women are married, the family or whoever, friends and advisees, they cut off all the relevant columns out of the nikah, including the right to divorce. And to tell women that you must read, because marriage is a contract, and you must read the contract to ensure that your rights are safeguarded. And in the same way, we talk about women's inheritance, which is a very big issue. In Pakistan, only 2% women own land. 5% women have bank accounts. So you're talking about using film, and in that Sharmeen very kindly gave her films to us to talk of these seriously important issues on your rights with regard to marriage and your rights with regard to inheritance of property and land. Nusrat, I move to you. We're going to finish this up in an hour because we don't have two of our panelists. I move to you now because you are an important part of the Karachi Biennale, and the Biennale also has taken a strong position with regard to making people think. Sometimes it's disruptive. It jars a lot of sensibilities. But tell me something. What more can we do? Or how has the Biennale succeeded in generating change? Not just creating, not just shocking. Let's not look at the shocking component, but the constructive part of things like biennales and literature festivals. Now we have a film festival, and I also like to bring to your attention that with Group Development Pakistan, we've had this short storytelling competition of the children. And I had worked with that earlier when I was in Sindh, on the very, very interesting stories and concerns that come out from children when they speak about the day and when they speak about their concerns. And then when you see their stories, you're able to allocate resources and policy interventions because you see what they're going through. So Nusrat, tell me a little bit about these different forums that you are a part of and their role in social change.
Okay, so as part of the discursive committee for last year's Biennale, as a lead up to the Biennale, which took place in October, we had a series of roundtable discussions. They were held at the Alliance Française, so they were like on a small scale, but we looked at issues like displacement. We had the artist, we had a filmmaker from Liari, Dosten Baloch, come. He had made a very funny and interesting film called Don, D-O-N Akhbar, which was a pun on D-A-W-N, the newspaper. And it was about this newspaper, which is sold every day in Liari. It has a very surreal mixture of real and fake news and pictures of violence, people who are dead or not dead. So you can't really tell, but, and he says you just don't know who's funding it, but a lot of people read it, and they don't even read it to find out what's real or not, but they read it just because it's sensationalized a stereotype of Liari, which is that there was a lot of violence going on. So, we had him come on one of the talks. We had speakers come at another session to talk of the displacement of urban populations. we had so that happened on a more sort of small and research-based scale. But the biennales themselves, because they take place in public sphere and they're open to anybody who can go, you have this tremendous interchange between artists and the public. For instance, in 2019, we had 7 spaces where the art had been displayed, and 3 of them were vast spaces: the Karachi Botanical Gardens and Zoo, Bagh-e Jinnah in Clifton, and Frey Hall. And all these places are very well visited by, you know, ordinary denizens of Karachi. So because of this public outreach, you have, I think, a lot of curiosity generated. People come, people look at art. People don't have to understand art, but it certainly makes people think about how imagination is being expressed. And I think here is where art and film connect, because we are both, in both media, we are talking about the act of imagination. And I think every successful country that wants to have an enlightened and well educated and peaceful and tolerant society has to give free rein to the imagination. And it has to allow tolerance for this imagination to be expressed in a diversity of forms. And I think the Biennale is playing a very important role in doing that. And I think in some ways, this counteracts some of the more stringent and repressive narratives that try to reduce diversity, that try to reduce the multiplicity of voices and people and cultures that we have in Pakistan. So I think this is one of the important things that the Biennale does. And I think the Karachi Biennale teams are really focused on this aspect of public outreach.
But Nusrat, when you talk about free reign of imagination, how do you then address hate speech and misogyny? How do you address that?
It is a problem, Rabia. It is a huge problem, especially now, as Sharmeen pointed out. It's very easy. Everybody is a filmmaker. Everybody who has a mobile phone is a filmmaker today. And that is why we have a plethora of rubbish also streaming through WhatsApp groups and coming through in many ways. So again, I would tether this phenomenon back to education. I think at the core of it, we need to go back to our textbooks. We need to have something solid, something moderate coming from our academic institutions, because that is where children develop the core of their intellectual development. That is where their intellect is going to put its roots and then take off. So I can't emphasize enough how important it is to improve on our educational texts. I think it comes down to that. And perhaps even have, like, once a week, have films like the film Patricia saw on the snow leopard. Maybe one day a week, the children have to just watch a kind of film, an educational documentary that's also well done, so that they learn something and they learn with responsibility. It doesn't mean that you all rush off. If an area has to be respected in terms of not spoiling its natural beauty, or not spoiling heritage, or not picking up something that belongs to our heritage through the smugglers. You learn this through your school and then take it forward as adults.
Very valid point. In Switzerland, I understand that they have Wednesday off, and the children don't go to school. They're not necessary, but if they go to school, it's actually a creative day. So they visit museums and they go to art shows, and so that Wednesday is a sort of cultural day. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, we are we're very, very strict in our schooling system. We're very competitive. Our children work, 9 to 5. Literally, they have 8 to 5. They have tuitions, and then they have additional courses, and somehow they don't seem to have the time within that very packed schedule for art and culture. And as Patricia so well said, we have an absolute wealth of intangible heritage in this country, which we must hold on to very dearly, because that is our, our identity, our shinaft. So I would like to thank both my panelists, my third one in Gilgit-Baltistan, and Mr. Lalchand, who couldn't make it. I'd like to thank Mishal. Seema, I'd like to thank the European Union for giving us this opportunity to have this film festival, and for all the very young, enterprising directors who shared their films with us. And we had a large number of films, but we were sort of restrained both by time, and sometimes if there was an overlap of subject, we had to leave some aside. So thank you all for being here. And thank you for all my panelists. Are there any questions, Mishal, that we need to address, or
no,
are we
madam,
okay?
no. We're
All
okay. We don't have any
Okay.
questions.
Okay, so thank you very much, Patricia. I hope to collaborate with you on that woman archive. I'm so interested in it. And I know I can speak for all of us watching here, and for Nusrat, that we're all available here, because the documentation of women and their role since partition to today, I keep saying we've had a prime minister, we've had a speaker, we've had a mountain climber, an Oscar winner, and yet we're 143 on the global gender index. So there's a huge dichotomy in the position of women, and we need to mentor more women to come forward. We need to create platforms of support, and we need people like you who are so entrenched in art and culture and have been a support to Pakistan since 1958, and people like Nusrat, who are trying to keep art and culture and philosophy and beauty alive in the world. So thank you very much. Thank you, Mishal, for coordinating it all. Thank you, Seema. Thank you, everybody. And I wish you good evening. I think we're at the end of our time. So thank you. And
Thank
Khuda
you for
Hafiz.
the opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you so much,
Thank
Rabia.
you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Really interesting. Thank you. Thank you,
Thank you.
Patricia.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.